Well, hello again, SMC and YouTube. I am so excited to be here for another talk. We've been doing these how to deal with COVID-19 talks. We of course did how to deal with COVID-19, stress and anxiety, then health issues. Well, now I am thrilled that we have John Wenger here with us, a brother here at Smithville Mennonite, to talk about how to deal with COVID-19 when you're on a mission trip to Africa. Now, we're going to talk mostly about the mission trip to Africa, but this all came in the context of when this whole virus thing broke out. And I'm just so glad, John, that you are here with us and we can have this conversation today. So
and I as well.
I believe you. And I know your wife is even more so. Let's just start right off. The ball rolling. When did you go to Africa?
We left on February 29th, 2020. We were supposed to come back March 17th, 2020, but we arrived home finally in the evening of the 20th March 2020.
Yep.
Safe.
Yep, safe and sound back home. That is so good. So now let's talk more about the trip. Where exactly did you go?
Well, we went to the Central African Republic and flew into Bangui, which is the capital. Mm-hmm. Approximately 4 million people live there. Half of the people living in the capital city.
Wow. Okay. And once you got there, what did you do?
We did lots of different things. We started in with equipment maintenance, assembling some equipment that was shipped over prior to our getting there, getting things ready for field work. We spent...
Okay. Let's back up just a little bit. One of the things that I love about this experience, John is a farmer, and many of you already know that, but this was a farming mission trip. So when you talk about getting equipment ready, you're talking about farm equipment.
Farm equipment, that's correct.
And putting crops out. So go ahead, just wanted to clarify.
Learning, so we spent several days with their tractor driver, Alex, in the fields, teaching, studying how we could best prepare the soil for seeds, as in least amount of trips, least amount of fuel, things like that would save them money and also prepare the soil properly. Mm-hmm. That was my focus for the first 3 days, I think. And then the other thing was we had a building project for this Marcelin to build him a house. So,
okay.
So
it was farming and construction.
Yes.
Which you enjoy both.
Farming, construction, mechanics, whatever. We did lots of different things.
Yeah.
And, so it was trying to get the lumber we needed and, build this house was somewhat of a challenge. But
tell us who Marcel is.
Marcelin is he's a fellow that has been working with the community, employing people just to help his community with this farm. There's also a bakery there. There's animals, sheep, goats, cattle, small chickens of some sort, turkeys.
Oh my goodness.
And so we're trying not only to teach them things, but how they can sustain life easier than waiting for a package to arrive from some other country where they would just wait for food. Mm-hmm. This is grow their food and, so the bakery, they bake and he goes and lets them buy it wholesale and they go to the village and sell. That's their might be someone's little niche, business.
Gotcha. So it really is field to table. And
yes.
That's what you're trying to,
yes, help them be more sustainable, and that's his whole focus is help. And of course to teach them about God too. When they gather in the morning, they usually have like prayer or something,
Excellent.
So, but yeah.
Now, how many people went with you from America? How many were on your team?
There was 4 of us. Jim Hawking from Warsaw, Indiana.
Well, you can give a shout out to all your team members.
Hey, Jim, thank you for tapping me to go along. But he is the founder of Water for Good,
Okay.
which we kind of partnered with them to move around with their driver. Bruce Imhoff, which is my boss. Tim Harley from Burbank.
Okay.
Harley Drilling, their family does water wells and oil wells. So those were the four of us. And we traveled over there to do this work.
Okay, so 4 on the team.
4 on the team.
Okay. Well, sorry, I kind of jumped in there because I
problem.
was trying to wrap my mind around, okay, how many guys were actually on the team? But there were 4 of you.
Yes.
Okay.
So the reason just wanted to touch a little bit on the reason we were building Marcelina House in 2016 when there was uprisings. He was displaced from his home. They ran to the bush to be safe, and he finally took his family to Cameroon, which is the next country to the east.
Right.
So his home was destroyed, so he wanted to be able to live on the farm with his family, so that's what we were doing.
Wow.
To help that reality come to life.
That's wonderful.
So, building a house with solid mahogany was definitely had its challenges.
The house was made of mahogany.
Yes, sir. And it was green lumber, so if there's any carpenters, they know what green lumber is very hard to work with. But,
Right.
someday we'll maybe show pictures, and
Yeah.
You can see what we've accomplished.
Wow. That's amazing. So how far did you get with the house?
We had the second floor on and the walls up, but we ran out of time, so we didn't get the trusses on. But I've got pictures since then that the trusses are all on. The siding is all clear up to the trusses. The roof wasn't quite on yet.
Wow.
So yeah, they moved right along.
That's excellent. And just so you know, we do hope to go a little more in depth with more of John's experience and maybe integrate pictures and probably have another talk before perhaps we can even come back to corporate worship. We might have to do another talk where you can show us some pictures, because I'd love to see a mahogany house. That's amazing.
Or even like a Wednesday night pictures or something.
Sure.
I'd be open to that.
Sure. Well, we can see that.
I'd like to share it with all of you.
Absolutely. Okay. Now a little broader question. What did you learn when you were there?
I think the biggest thing that was what I learned was just the struggle, the day-to-day struggle with the things people dealt with. Just, getting food, preparing it, living. This is considered one of the poorest countries in the world. I think it's, in the last 3 or 4 is what the last statistics that I read.
Wow.
So yes, it's a very poor country.
Wow.
Lots of non-governmental organizations working there, but
NGOs,
yes. And so that was, some of the employment that was available. And, relying on the outside world.
Wow.
But yeah, I learned that it's definitely a struggle for them.
Okay. Now I guess the next question that I've been wanting to hear for a while is, how did you get home? Talk about that trek, because you said you were supposed to come home on the 17th and you didn't get home till the 20th. So can you kind of walk us through what that process was and what you were hearing from home and how that all went down?
Yeah, well, the simple answer how we got home was lots of prayer.
Amen.
From many different people and places. Thank you. But I think it was the third ticket till we finally had one that stick till we could get out of the country. We ended up flying further away to Kenya. Was the only available way to move out of that country. Things were changing from hour to hour rapidly.
Yep.
Flights were being canceled in flight. and turned around, and they came back, and
Flights were being canceled in flight.
the flight that finally took us out, we were supposed to go to Cameroon, and they wouldn't let us go. The plane actually left. It was in flight, turned around and landed. We got on that same plane, and they went to Nairobi, Kenya, where another 3 hours away. When we got there, it was many questions about health.
Yep.
You know, were you around dead people? Because they were wanting to know about Ebola, not just coronavirus, other things serious. And so, yeah, we knew things were really going downhill, and we were thankful to be able to get out of that country, because the other countries around them were closing the borders, where no one was going to be able to go in or out. Supplies, were being cut off. Fuel, they were worried about that. Food, and the fellow that took us to the airport through the interpreter said, "The coronavirus isn't going to kill us. We're going to starve to death," because the country was being closed off so quickly, and food comes, daily from.
And they didn't have food.
Well, I mean, that was their concern. At the point we left, there was still plenty of food there, but it's happening. It was happening so quickly.
Yeah.
People weren't prepared and didn't know how to prepare.
But that's something. Just that observation right there, John. We are so worried in this country about coronavirus, but over there, they're worried about having food, and it's mind blowing.
And it's just another side note. Probably over half the people in that country don't know what toilet paper is. So that's the attitude that I couldn't believe I was hearing this. Well, when I'm coming home, we started hearing about these shelves being emptied. My daughter Miranda sent me pictures about how it's gone, and it's like, man, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But yes, through this, so after we got to Nairobi, Kenya, within an hour we were on another plane, which was a 15-hour flight to New York. Very hot, very crowded.
Nairobi to JFK.
Yeah, so from rollback to when we stopped, it was almost exactly 15 hours. And the seats were very small.
I was going to say, you were 15 hours on the plane. It was full.
And I sat there, didn't even move for the first 8 hours, because it was, wherever you go, it's dark. And
wow.
So that was an interesting experience.
That's just incredible. So then you arrive after 15 hours at JFK.
And our first flight out of JFK was canceled to Cleveland. So we quick scrambling and back to Kenya Air, so they were able to get us within, I think, another hour and a half, another flight to Cleveland. So yes, it was quite an ordeal, but many people were praying. Many people were working. When we were in Africa, we had travel agents on the phone with airlines, but they were shutting everybody out. They weren't letting anybody make adjustments.
Yeah.
Because stuff was happening so rapidly that they were trying to get control of things themselves. So the travel agent couldn't do anything for us.
Wow. Well, and just the chaos.
Yeah.
Was JFK pretty full when you got there?
Ghost town.
Really?
Nobody was there. I mean, you'd walk, and when we were leaving, it was shoulder to shoulder people everywhere. But when we came back, I mean, some of the food stands were even closed because of the restaurants closing. So nothing sit down. We were able to get a burger, but
yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, another kind of open-ended question. What surprised you about your trip, either when you were there or when you were coming home? What caught you unaware?
Well, I think we in this country, we have so much available, parts stores, hardware stores, tools.
Yep.
And I think the hardest thing was knowing how to do something and then not being able to get your hands on the proper tools or the part you needed, and it was trying to make do with what you had
Right.
took on a whole different meaning.
Oh yeah. Improvise.
Yep.
That kind of reminds me a little bit of Mongolia.
Well, I think it was beyond. It was beyond that.
Mongolia.
Yeah, I believe.
Wow.
And I guess another thing that surprised me was they were adamant before we left, telling me this is not a vacation. Prepare yourself.
Right.
And don't eat something that isn't prepared by the. So we had our own personal chef or cook, and I was amazed at the food he came up with, and it was actually good.
Sure.
So yeah, from the Nile monitor lizard to the beef that we had, it was all good eating.
You ate Nile monitor lizard.
Yes, sir. It was.
You can look that up later.
But yeah, the lizard was probably about
That's a
3
big
feet
lizard.
long, and it didn't really taste like chicken. Most things people say it tastes like chicken, but yeah.
But it was all right.
Yeah, that was kind of a surprise too, that the food was that good, and
Good.
plenty of fresh mangoes and other things that I don't even know what they were, but it was good.
Now, what about the heat?
The
Because
heat.
you told me we were
I think
back
that
and forth on WhatsApp,
Yeah,
and you were
that's-
telling me
that's-
temperatures, and I just couldn't believe it.
That was what surprised me. I think the most was dealing with the heat.
Yeah.
Was one day we had a thermometer that we carried around, but in the sun it was almost 120 one day, and you're trying to work building a house in that kind of temperature. It got so hot. If you laid something down, a tool in the sun, and it would be so hot you could hardly hang on to it. I mean,
That's hot.
It's hot. So most days by noon it was 110 to 115 in the sun, and it was very hot. We usually us Americans had to take a little break. But
Well, of course. And then what would you say, how did you see God move through this whole experience? Where did you see God's hand at work? Maybe through you guys, maybe through the people there. Where would you say you saw God move?
well, I think it was day-to-day stories that I'd hear, or people that we would run into that were just glad we were there because they knew we were helping to bring better things to them. For instance, we went to this church, and how they were so encouraged that we were there. Mm-hmm. We were the first white guys since 1983 that took the time to converse with them after church. They invited us for coffee, so we went and sat in the pastor's living room and had coffee and just through interpreters and just shared and prayed with them before we left, and that was a huge encouragement to them. So that just things like that, and the stories that Marceline had about, we were trying to order more lumber, and he's talking to the guy on the phone, and the guy's like, just send a truck, I'll give it to you. I know what you're doing for your community. Just come on over, bring a truck, I'll give you some more lumber.
Wow.
And some of the heavy lumber was actually being sawed by chainsaw out in the bush, but for the walls we needed a little better than the chainsaw cut.
Sure.
But yeah, it's stories like that and how we were able to make things work on timing, and I think when I sat there those extra days, how God would I had a sense of calmness. It's like, well, it's out of my control. I can't make the airplane stop. I can't make them,
Right.
get on or, get our tickets. It was all His timing, and
Yeah.
so there was many different ways.
That's good. That's very good. Well, was there anything else?
Well, I think I would definitely like to end by saying thank you, Pastor Todd, everyone else that prayed. As we went, as we were struggling to get home, I just really appreciate the support. I've since had several people call, from church to call me. make sure I'm doing well. So thank you to everyone who prayed and got us home safely.
Well, John, I can tell you, it was a privilege to pray for you, and it was so exciting to track you coming home and the way Rita was just faithfully praying and giving us updates, and then when you finally were home, it was just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. It was an experience I won't soon forget. Going over there in the middle of this, and I'm thankful that we got home safely. None of us have been sick. I think the biggest risk was for us at the airport in New York. Out in the middle of the bush, they never heard the word coronavirus.
Right.
But the day before we left, there was a UN worker that was tested positive in the city. So they were, because the way their health habits, they live very crudely. Right. So it probably will spread quickly in a country like that.
Once it gets there. Wow. So pray for the Central African Republic. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, John, thank you for coming in and sharing your story. Want to let you know that we will have this posted on our YouTube channel. If you have questions for John, you can post them there. John, you can keep watching that as well and maybe answer those questions as you wish. Or feel free to give me a call at the church office, and I can ask John the questions as well. The other thing that we're going to try now is to put the audio of this interview on a podcast. It's called The Table, and you should be able to find that on Spotify if you look up The Table and Todd Martin. So until we meet again, God bless you and go in his peace. Amen.